Zork adjusted his glowing green antennae as he glanced nervously at the screen in his spaceship. Earth, a planet teeming with life and strange customs, was his destination. His mission was clear: learn how humans communicate and blend in. To do that, he had to master their language, English. As his ship landed quietly behind a grove of trees, Zork activated his human disguise. His bright green skin turned peach, and his large black eyes shrank to a pair of round brown ones. Now he looked like any other human teenager. Almost. He tugged at his new hoodie, muttering the phrases he had memorized from Earth's TV shows. "Hello. My name is Zork." He hesitated, then corrected himself. "No, Zach. My name is Zach." Zork stepped off the ship, clutching a small glowing device that would help him record and analyze everything he learned. Ahead, the large building of Greenfield High loomed. "This is it," he thought. Taking a deep breath, he whispered, "Let's make some human friends." Zork approached the entrance of Greenfield High, his heart racing in his chest. The air smelled like cafeteria food and something he couldn't quite place. It was different from his home planet. Loud, chaotic, and filled with energy. Hundreds of human students were walking in different directions, chatting and laughing. Zork felt small and out of place among them, but he kept his head high, repeating his mantra, "I am Zach, a human teenager." As he passed a group of students, his antennae momentarily slipped out of his hoodie. Panicked, Zork quickly yanked them back inside, hoping no one had noticed. Just as he turned the corner, he bumped into a girl holding a stack of books. "Whoa! Are you okay?" the girl asked, smiling warmly. Zork, startled, stammered, "Yes. I am okay. Sorry." The girl tilted her head curiously. "You're new, right?" she asked. Zork nodded, trying to act casual. "Yes, I am new here." "Well, welcome," the girl said brightly. "I'm Emily. Let me show you around." It's kind of confusing at first. Zork was both relieved and nervous. He repeated what he had just learned in his head. "I am new here." His accent was a bit off, but Emily didn't seem to mind. "Follow me, Zach," Emily said, turning with a friendly smile. Zork followed her into the hallways, trying to absorb everything around him. The walls were covered with posters for upcoming events, and the sound of lockers slamming echoed through the air. He made sure to repeat the words he was hearing. "New, here. Emily." The bell rang, signaling the end of the morning classes. Students poured out of their classrooms, heading toward the cafeteria. Zork felt a bit unsure about this next part. He had heard a lot about Earth food, but he had never tried it himself. Emily noticed his hesitation as they walked toward the lunchroom. "You look a little lost," she said, giving him a kind smile. "Don't worry, lunch here is great. You'll love it." Zork tried to smile back, but his stomach was tied in knots. What is the food like?" he asked, his voice a bit too high-pitched. "It's just like, well, everything," Emily said, laughing. "You can choose anything. Pizza, burgers, salad, spaghetti, sandwiches. Basically anything you want." They entered the cafeteria, and Zork's eyes widened at the sight of the long lunch lines. Students were standing in front of counters, picking food and paying with something called money. Zork was a bit confused but followed Emily to the line. As they approached the lunch lady, Emily smiled and said, "I'll have a pizza slice, please." Zork stepped up next. His turn. The lunch lady looked at him, waiting for his order. His heart raced. He had no idea what to choose. Emily leaned in and whispered, "Just try spaghetti. It's easy to say, and you'll love it." Zork took a deep breath. "I'd like spaghetti, please," he said, carefully enunciating each word. The lunch lady nodded, handing him a tray with spaghetti. "Good job, Zach," Emily cheered. "See? That wasn't so hard." Zork smiled, grateful for Emily's help. He repeated the phrase to himself, "I'd like spaghetti." It didn't feel so strange anymore. After they picked up their food, Emily led Zork to a table where a few of her friends were sitting. They all looked at him with curiosity as he sat down, trying to adjust to the new situation. He wasn't sure how to start a conversation, but Emily quickly helped by introducing him. "This is Zach," she said. "He's new here. Be nice to him, okay?" A tall boy with messy brown hair smiled at Zork. "Hey, Zach, I'm Jake. Welcome to Greenfield High. What's your favorite sport?" Zork blinked. Sport. He hadn't heard that word before. "Sport?" he asked, hoping it wasn't a trick question. Emily leaned in and explained, "It means things like basketball, soccer, or tennis. What do you like to do?" Zork thought for a moment. "I like, running," he said, recalling the only Earth activity he'd seen on TV. "Running fast." "Running, huh? Nice." Jake nodded. "I'm on the track team, so we should race sometime." The other kids laughed, and Zork smiled. He repeated the word track in his head to remember it for later. "So what else do you like, Zach?" asked a girl with glasses. Her name was Lily. "Movies. Music." Zork paused. What did humans do for fun? He wasn't sure how to explain his love for the stars and space travel, so he said, "I like watching movies." Lily's eyes lit up. "Me too. What kinds of movies do you like?" Zork felt his nerves start to fade. "I like action movies. Lots of action. And explosions." He mimicked a big explosion with his hands. The group laughed, and Zork felt more comfortable. He repeated the words they used: movies, action, explosions, and felt a sense of connection. For the first time, he wasn't just an alien. He was a student, making friends, and speaking English. After lunch, Zork followed Emily to their next class, English. As they walked down the hallway, Zork tried to remember the words he had learned so far. Spaghetti, movies, track. He was starting to feel more confident, but this class was different. English. His mission was to learn it, and now he was about to dive into the heart of it. They entered the classroom, and Zork sat down at an empty desk. The teacher, Mr. Peterson, stood at the front, preparing to start the lesson. "Good afternoon, everyone," he said in a cheerful voice. "Today, we're going to practice some new vocabulary and sentence structure." Zork felt his heart race. He had heard the word vocabulary before, but he wasn't sure what it meant in a classroom setting. Emily noticed his uncertainty and whispered, "Don't worry, just listen closely, and you'll get it." Mr. Peterson began writing on the board. Today's lesson is all about the present simple tense. We'll practice with common verbs. Let's start with to be. Zork's eyes widened. To be. He whispered to Emily. It's a verb. It's used to say things like I am or you are, Emily explained. Zork repeated the words quietly to himself. I am, you are, he tried to say it like the others. Now, Mr. Peterson said, let's practice. I'll ask you some questions. Answer using the verb to be. He looked directly at Emily and smiled. Emily, are you ready to help Zach, our new student, with the lesson? Emily nodded enthusiastically, and Mr. Peterson turned to Zork, using his name for the first time. Zach, are you new here? Zork froze. The entire class turned to look at him. The pressure was immense. He quickly nodded. Yes, I am new here, he said, feeling the heat rise in his cheeks. Great job, Zach. Mr. Peterson smiled. And now, what's your favorite subject? Zork paused for a moment. My favorite subject. He glanced at Emily for help. Say my favorite subject is, she whispered. Zork nodded and tried again. My favorite subject is running. The class giggled, but Mr. Peterson smiled encouragingly. Well, running isn't exactly a subject, but I'm sure it's fun. Zork's face lit up with a mix of embarrassment and pride. He had just used the verb to be correctly. Even though he wasn't sure about the subject question, he felt like he was starting to understand. The classroom wasn't as scary anymore. After the question about his favorite subject, the class settled into a rhythm. Mr. Peterson began explaining more about the present simple tense, using simple examples that Zork could follow. The structure of the sentences wasn't too difficult, and Zork could feel his understanding of the language growing. Every time he heard a new word or sentence, he tried to repeat it, sometimes quietly, sometimes out loud, just like the others. As the lesson went on, Mr. Peterson called on different students to form sentences using the verb to be. Sophie, tell us where you're from. Sophie, a girl with curly hair, stood up. I'm from London, she said confidently, smiling at Zork as she spoke. Nice, Mr. Peterson said. Now, Jake, where are you from? Jake stood up and grinned. I'm from right here in Greenfield, he said, laughing. Zork listened carefully to the sentence structure. I'm from, he repeated it in his mind. He wanted to try it himself, but his nerves were back again. What if he said something wrong? Just then, Mr. Peterson turned to him with a friendly smile. Zach, why don't you give it a try? Where are you from? Zork's stomach flipped. Everyone was looking at him. But Emily gave him a reassuring thumbs up, and that helped him take a deep breath. I'm from, he paused, then smiled nervously. I'm from a place very far away. From space. The class stared for a moment, and then, as if it was perfectly normal, they burst into laughter. Zork laughed too, feeling the tension release from his body. It wasn't perfect, but it was a step forward. Very creative, Zach, Mr. Peterson chuckled. I think we can all agree that's a very unique answer. Zork felt a little embarrassed, but he was proud too. He had made a connection, even if it was a strange one. It was progress, and he was learning, slowly but surely. The lesson continued, and Zork practiced more sentences. I am from space. I am new here. The repetition helped him internalize the language, and with each sentence, he felt a little more confident. By the end of the class, Zork felt much more comfortable with English. It wasn't perfect yet, but every little victory, like correctly using the verb to be or remembering new words, made the language feel less foreign. He was starting to feel like he truly belonged here. The bell rang, signaling the end of the day. Zork felt a wave of relief wash over him, but also a sense of accomplishment. It had been a long day of new experiences and challenges, but he had made it through. The school day was over, But his journey was just beginning. As the students started gathering their things, Emily walked over to Zork. "You did great today, Zach. I can see you're really starting to get the hang of it." Zork smiled, a little shy but grateful. "Thanks, Emily. I was so nervous at first, but now I feel better about this whole school thing." Emily laughed. "You should. You're doing awesome, and you're only going to get better the more you practice. Just keep going, and you'll be speaking perfect English in no time." Zork nodded, his confidence growing with each passing moment. He had faced so many challenges today, but with Emily's help, he had made progress. The language didn't seem as intimidating as it had at the start of the day. In fact, it was starting to feel a little bit like home. As Zork grabbed his backpack, he noticed the students around him chatting, laughing, and heading out the door. He wanted to join them, to be part of the group. It felt like a distant dream when he first arrived, but now, with a little bit of English under his belt, it felt like it was within reach. "See you tomorrow, Zach," Mr. Peterson called out as Zork was about to leave. "See you," Zork called back, feeling a small thrill run through him. He had spoken English to his teacher, and it had felt natural. As he walked out of the classroom, Zork realized something important. He wasn't just learning English anymore. He was starting to live it. In the hallways, students were still chatting, and the afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows. Zork took a deep breath, feeling proud of himself. Today had been just the beginning. He wasn't just a visitor anymore. He was a part of this world, learning, growing, and discovering. And as he stepped outside into the fresh air, Zork couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, he'd be ready for whatever came next.